When a man avoids you, it reveals everything about his inner world, and what I'm about to share will transform how you understand male psychology forever. You've probably wondered why someone who seems so connected to you suddenly creates distance, building invisible walls where there once was intimacy. The truth is, avoidance isn't indifference. It's often the most powerful form of unconscious communication, a protective mechanism against feelings too overwhelming to face. The male psyche operates through complex defense systems that activate when emotions threaten their carefully constructed sense of control. When he pulls away, he's not rejecting you. He's protecting himself from the intensity of what you represent in his unconscious mind. This withdrawal speaks a language deeper than words, revealing conflicts between desire and fear, between the authentic self and the socially conditioned persona. Understanding this hidden dynamic will give you insights that most people never discover about human relationships. The next few minutes will unlock the psychological mysteries behind male avoidance, showing you how projection, repression, and transference shape every interaction. You'll learn to read the subtle signs that distinguish genuine disinterest from psychological defense, discovering how the unconscious mind reveals its secrets through contradictions and behavioral patterns. Imagine meeting someone and feeling an electric connection, conversations flowing effortlessly, eyes meeting with understanding, and for a moment the world stops spinning. Then suddenly, without warning, he retreats into himself, avoiding your gaze, responding hesitantly to messages, transforming that natural closeness into an impenetrable barrier. What really happens in these moments transcends conscious awareness, operating in the deepest layers of the psyche where primitive instincts meet civilized expectations. The unconscious knows no accidents. Every action carries meaning that extends beyond rational understanding. His avoidance becomes a silent language, communicating not indifference but overwhelming significance. You've become too important, too threatening to his emotional equilibrium. The masculine psyche learns early to control emotions, to maintain composure under all circumstances, to never appear vulnerable or dependent. When you trigger something beyond his control, something that challenges his defensive structures, the oldest instinct activates, flight from emotional danger. This isn't conscious decision-making, but automatic psychological protection, the unconscious recognizing threat, not from you as a person, but from the loss of control you represent. Think about a man who's spent decades perfecting emotional regulation, suddenly encountering someone who awakens longings he can't manage or understand. His unconscious doesn't react to emotional neutrality with avoidance. It responds to perceived threats, to psychological stability. The more powerful the unconscious attraction, the more intense the defensive response becomes. Every retreat becomes a silent confession that you've touched something profound, something he fears exploring. This creates the ultimate irony. The man who avoids you most might be the one most deeply affected by your presence. His unconscious battles feelings too powerful to acknowledge, creating behavioral contradictions that reveal the internal struggle. He might avoid eye contact while you sense his constant attention, respond briefly to messages while replying immediately, create physical distance while his body language betrays attraction. These paradoxes mark the signature of inner conflict, where conscious intention battles unconscious desire. The unconscious communicates through opposites, showing interest through apparent disinterest, affection through distance, longing through avoidance. When he looks at you and suddenly pulls back as if seeing a ghost, he's encountering not just you, but his own reflection in the mirror of your presence. Projection transforms you into a canvas for his hidden truths, forcing him to confront aspects of himself he's spent years suppressing. The human psyche cannot tolerate what it doesn't understand, so when a man has repressed certain qualities, vulnerability, emotional openness, need for connection, he projects these onto others. Meeting someone who embodies these qualities becomes an unconscious confrontation with his own buried self. Consider a man taught throughout childhood that emotions equal weakness, whose tears were dismissed and needs for comfort rejected. To survive emotionally, he buried these aspects deep in his unconscious, where they wait in the shadows of his soul. When he encounters you, his unconscious recognizes exactly these repressed qualities in your emotional openness, natural vulnerability, and capacity for deep connection. This recognition happens below conscious awareness, striking like lightning and triggering primitive fear responses. What he sees in you isn't really you, but the projection of his own suppressed emotional world. And since he learned to fear and avoid these feelings, he avoids you by extension. You show him his own forgotten strength, the courage to feel that he never allowed himself to experience. Projection works like an invisible filter placed over reality. So when he looks at you, he sees his own fear of intimacy reflected back. Your warmth triggers his buried longing for closeness. Your authenticity confronts him with his own emotional masquerading. This explains why men often flee from women most similar to them in soul depth. Their unconscious recognizes kindred spirits with terrifying precision. Sometimes this recognition is so shocking, it triggers immediate flight responses. Remember those moments when you felt truly seen by someone, not your appearance, but your essential self. These are precisely when avoidance intensifies most dramatically. Being perceived means having projections reflected back, forcing uncomfortable self-recognition. A man afraid of his own emotional depth will avoid depth in women. Someone whose suppressed creativity feels threatened by creative women, and those who learn to view love as weakness retreat from loving women. The paradox of projection is that we often avoid the very people who could help us heal because they become living reminders of what we've lost or never developed within ourselves. Your presence becomes an unconscious accusation against impoverished self-image, yet also represents the solution to his psychological imprisonment. His avoidance isn't judgment of your worth, but testimony to your authenticity. You've awakened something so deeply buried, he forgot it existed. Through projection, you become the screen for his suppressed yearnings, and when he avoids you, he's really avoiding the possibilities within himself that you've illuminated. The human soul masters self-preservation through sophisticated defense mechanisms, and when feelings become too threatening, when memories prove too painful, when desires seem too dangerous, the unconscious activates its most powerful weapon, repression. What a man refuses to feel gets banished to the psychological basement, but nothing truly disappears there, instead waiting for the moment of return. Imagine repression as an invisible guardian standing watch at the doors of consciousness, tasked with keeping away anything that might threaten carefully constructed self-image. This guardian works so efficiently that men often don't know what they've repressed until you appear, threatening to unlock the forbidden chambers of their souls. Repression typically forms in earliest years, when young boys quickly learn which emotions are acceptable and which prove dangerous. Perhaps his tenderness was rejected as unmanly, his tears interpreted as weakness, his needs for closeness dismissed as childish. To earn love and acceptance, he begins burying these parts of himself in psychological graves. But the repressed never truly vanishes, instead accumulating in psychic depths where it gains dark power, flowing like an underground river that influences behavior in ways conscious mind cannot comprehend. When you enter his life unconsciously addressing these exact repressed aspects, his longing for unconditional acceptance, his need for emotional security, his fear of vulnerability, the repression walls begin cracking. His unconscious sounds alarms announcing danger, fearing you might expose everything so carefully hidden. The predictable reaction involves strengthened repression through avoidance. If he doesn't see you, he doesn't have to feel. And if he doesn't feel, his protective barriers remain intact. Avoidance becomes the emergency brake for a psyche terrified of its own depths. Consider the irony that the more a man has repressed, the stronger his reaction to women embodying those repressed aspects becomes. His defenses are proportional to what he fears losing: control over carefully regulated emotions. Men who repressed fear of rejection avoid women who make them feel particularly vulnerable. Those who buried longing for deep connection flee from women who could provide exactly that connection. And men who experience neediness as weakness create distance from women who could fulfill their needs. Repression functions like a dam holding back wild emotional waters, and as long as the dam holds, he feels safe and controlled. But you, through your presence, authenticity, and ability to touch his soul, create cracks in this psychological dam. His unconscious senses this danger and mobilizes all available defense mechanisms, making avoidance a repair measure for a dam threatening to burst. The more intense his repression, the more drastic his avoidance becomes. Understand the tragic beauty of this dynamic. He doesn't avoid you because you mean too little, but because you mean too much. You represent everything he's denied himself: permission to feel, freedom to love, courage for vulnerability. His repression has made him a stranger in his own life, learning to function while forgetting how to truly live. Then you arrive, reminding him what living could actually mean. Avoidance becomes repression's last attempt to maintain control, but it only reveals how powerful the repressed has already become. The dam still holds, but the water rises relentlessly, and your presence becomes a silent revolution against the tyranny of repression. The past never truly passes away. It lives on in every glance, every touch, every moment of encounter. What I recognized as transference represents one of the most powerful yet unconscious mechanisms of human psychology. When a man avoids you, he's often not encountering you, but the ghosts of his past that resurrect in your form. Picture a young boy experiencing his first deep disappointment through a woman, perhaps a mother who abandoned him, a first love who hurt him, a teacher who betrayed his trust. This wound never completely heals, becoming a psychological map of caution that his unconscious carries into all future encounters. Decades later, he meets you, and while rationally you're completely different from those women of his past, the unconscious doesn't operate rationally. It works through patterns, feelings, and archetypal memories. A certain tone in your voice, a gesture, a moment of closeness, and suddenly he's again the vulnerable boy who was once disappointed. Transference transforms you into a screen onto which his history gets projected, making you the mother who left, the lover who betrayed, the authority who humiliated. This confusion happens completely unconsciously. He sees you while simultaneously feeling old fear, ancient pain, and buried anger. Avoidance then becomes protection against repetition that already feels predetermined in his fantasy. Why expose himself to possible renewed injury when his unconscious whispers that you'll do exactly what all the others did before? The tragedy of transference lies in its potential to become self-fulfilling prophecy. By avoiding you to prevent imaginary hurt, he often creates exactly the situation he fears. His withdrawal becomes rejection, his caution turns cold, his fear materializes into reality. Yet understand the deeper truth here. When a man views you through the lens of his past, it means you've triggered something significant within him. His transference shows you've touched important themes in his soul, themes so powerful they transcend decades. You're not responsible for his past wounds, but you could hold the key to their healing. Every transference carries potential for correction within it. If you respond differently than the figures from his past, you can shatter old patterns. Avoidance then becomes not the end, but the beginning of an unconscious healing process. His psyche testing whether you'll be like all the others or prove that the past doesn't have to determine the future. In the depths of the masculine psyche rages a war that most men never consciously perceive, the battle between the id, with its primitive drives and longings, and the superego, that stern internal authority determining what's permitted and forbidden. When a man avoids you, you often become an innocent witness to this internal battlefield. The id knows only one law, the pleasure principle, yearning for connection, closeness, merging with another human being. Seeing you, it screams that you're the answer to all hidden desires, wanting to surrender, open up, lose itself in the ecstasy of encounter. But immediately the superego responds. That internal voice born from decades of social conditioning, warning that men show no weakness, maintain complete control, need nobody. The superego has learned to view intimacy as threat, as betrayal of masculine identity. Between these two forces stands the ego, torn, confused, overwhelmed, trying to find compromise between the burning desire of the id and the strict prohibitions of the superego. Often the only solution the ego can find is flight, avoidance as escape from an unsolvable conflict. Imagine a man whose entire life taught him that success means autonomy, suddenly meeting you and having his idea awaken with frightening power. He wants to open up, drop his masks, show real feelings, but his superego sounds alarms declaring this weakness, dependency, failure to meet masculine standards. The internal conflict becomes unbearable as his longing for you grows alongside his fear of that longing. The superego bombards him with accusations about making himself ridiculous, failing, playing the fool, and the stronger his feelings become, the louder these internal voices grow. Avoidance becomes the emergency solution for an ego caught between two fires. If he doesn't see you, he doesn't have to choose between desire and principles, and by maintaining distance, he can preserve the illusion of control. But here lies the irony. In trying to preserve autonomy, he becomes enslaved to his own fears. The superego that should protect him from weakness makes him weak, and the control he seeks to maintain becomes the uncontrollability of his emotions. You become the symbol of everything he's not allowed to want, your presence reminding him that he's more than his role, function, or social mask. You embody the possibility of life beyond his superego's strict rules. Understand the tragedy of his situation. He's not avoiding you, but the possibility of being completely himself. His fear of intimacy is really fear of his own humanity, as the superego taught him to view natural needs as weakness. Yet within this conflict lies hidden hope, because every internal battle shows the id still lives, that his original longings haven't been completely suffocated. His resistance to intimacy paradoxically proves his yearning for exactly that intimacy. When he avoids you, he's not fighting against you, but fighting for the right to love you. His superego might win the battle, but the id never forgets what it found in you. After this journey through the depths of masculine psychology, you now face the crucial question: how do you decipher the hidden language of his unconscious and distinguish between genuine disinterest and the complex choreography of defense? The answer lies not in his words, but in the contradictions of his behavior. The unconscious cannot lie, only obscure, and when a man avoids you for deeper psychological reasons, this leaves traces that trained eyes can recognize. Watch for the paradoxes. He avoids your gaze, but you feel his attention, responds briefly, but answers immediately, creates physical distance while his body language betrays attraction. These contradictions are the fingerprints of internal conflict, where the conscious self says no while the unconscious can only whisper yes. The greater this discrepancy, the more intense the internal battle you've triggered. Observe his reactions in unguarded moments when he thinks you're not watching. Does his expression soften? Does his gaze linger longer? The unconscious relaxes when it feels unobserved, revealing true feelings in these vulnerable moments. Notice the intensity of his avoidance, because indifference is quiet and constant, while psychological defense is loud and fluctuating. A man who genuinely finds you uninteresting will simply ignore you. But someone fighting his own feelings will overreact, looking away too quickly, responding too hastily, creating distance too obviously. Temporal patterns also reveal much. as genuine disinterest remains constant, while psychological defense fluctuates with his internal state. Some days he's more distant, others almost accessible, and these variations show the battle between different parts of his psyche. Pay special attention to his reactions during emotional moments when you're vulnerable, needing support, or being authentic. The unconscious of a man who truly feels you cannot help but respond in such moments, even if he immediately withdraws afterward, because that first impulse reveals his genuine feelings. Listen to the words he doesn't say, as men often speak in hints about things that move them, mentioning you in conversations with others, asking about you indirectly, showing interest in things that interest you. The unconscious always finds ways to communicate its truth. Notice his reactions to other men in your vicinity, as jealousy provides one of the strongest proofs of suppressed feeling. A man who supposedly finds you uninteresting should show no emotional reaction when other men get your attention. Yet if he unconsciously desires you, his behavior will show subtle signs of possessiveness or discomfort. The most important realization is this: trust your own intuition, because your unconscious communicates with his unconscious on a level words never reach. If you sense there's more than he shows, if you feel a connection he seems to deny, trust that feeling. Your feminine unconscious is a finely calibrated instrument for emotional truths, sensing his longing through all masks, recognizing his fear behind all coolness, feeling his love despite all defenses. The truth is that a man who avoids you for psychological reasons invests more emotional energy in you than one who openly courts you, because his avoidance is a complex emotional act requiring immense unconscious force. You have the power to read these signals and recognize the truth behind the mask, so trust your perception. It's more precise than you think. We've taken a journey together through the hidden landscapes of masculine psychology, and what we've discovered changes everything. Avoidance isn't rejection, but an unconscious love letter, encrypted in the language of fear. You've learned that the unconscious never acts randomly. Every avoidance carries a message. Every withdrawal is a silent confession of suppressed feelings. Projection makes you the mirror of his repressed longings. Transference lets him see the ghosts of his past in you. And the battle between id and superego tears his soul between desire and prohibition. You're not the cause of his fear, but the revelation of his deepest truth, and in his avoidance lies the paradoxical acknowledgement of your power to touch his soul and bring down his carefully constructed walls. This recognition frees you from the illusion that you did something wrong, liberates you from the fear of not being enough, and shows you the truth. You're so powerfully authentic that even his unconscious cannot help but react, even when that reaction initially looks like rejection. What hidden truth in your own heart could change your life forever if you had the courage to recognize and live it? If this journey into the depths of human psychology has brought you new insights, share in the comments which country you're watching from. I'm curious about our wonderful international community of people brave enough to look deeper.